This oral history of museum computing is provided by Tina Shaw and was recorded on the 24th of May, 2021 by Paul Marty and Kathy Jones.
I started working with museums back in 2008. I had moved to LA for around 2006. I had just gotten married, and my husband at the time had already had a job and was working in LA. So I joined him out there after we got married. And my first job out there was I was teaching. I was teaching at a private school full time. I think the department was interactive media or something. So kind of doing a huge range of things, learning, teaching about database design to website design, development, video projects, photography, you name it. And then I left that job about a year later, and I was new to LA, and I just, wasn't really sure where to look for a job. I didn't know LA very well, didn't really know too many people, but I had visited the Getty at a certain point, and thinking about where I wanted to look for a job, I was like, well, that was a really beautiful museum. I think it would be really interesting to work in a museum. So looked on their job board and applied for a job, uh, got an interview. And I remember this was 2008, and I was driving on the 405. I passed the Goodyear blimp, and I thought, okay, this is good luck. This is going to be a good year. Um, and yeah, and after that interview, I found out I got got the job and felt very lucky, and also found out I was pregnant. So that was a surprise. Um, but yeah, and being away from home, being away from Chicago, away from my family, working at the Getty was just an amazing experience. The people that I worked with there, in the web department, I think is what it was called now. I don't even know what I remember what it was called at the time, and it's changed titles many, many times. But they were like a family there to me, and we worked together on many web projects, and just felt very, just a great group to work with. My home away from home. Um, and I guess one of the projects that I worked on that sticks out the most is working on our very first multi-touch table at the museum. Multi-touch tables were pretty new at the time. We had a gigantic table made from a company called Ideum, which works with museums a lot, work then and now. And we were one of the first museums to acquire this multi-touch table. And my boss at the time was really rallying for it. Really, I guess she'd seen the table at a different conference, maybe at AAM. And she was just like, we need to get one of these tables here. Let's do something really cool on it. And so, yeah, we got the table and we started developing in it. And the code to program applications on the table was written in AS3. So I'd been working a little bit with AS3, and but it was nonetheless challenging to program for something like a touch interface. And me and one of my colleagues worked weekends, evenings, etc. So basically, we had an application that we were creating for an event that was part of the AAM conference. That year, the AAM conference was happening in LA, and there was going to be an event at the Getty in the evening. So we decided to create an application that showed a map of cultural institutions in the area, and you can touch points on the map and get more information about those cultural institutions, and view images of those institutions, and basically get your grounding. A lot of people attending the conference weren't from LA, so we thought this would be a nice way to introduce the technology. And yeah, worked many late evenings and weekends. Got very close to my colleague and my boss at the time, and she even came with her kids during the weekends, to show us support while her kids roamed the museum. And we finally unveiled, launched at this event, and it went great until someone very high up in the museum put down their empty drink glass down on this table, thinking that it was just a regular table, basically putting their trash on the table. And the look on my face, I don't think my colleagues will ever forget. But it was just, kind of a, I don't know if you can call it ironic, but it was just like, oh my God, all this time and energy. And, some people don't even realize that it was an interactive table. So, uh, um, and basically, I worked at the Getty for about a few years, was missing home, missing Chicago. So came back to Chicago to work at the Field Museum, Natural History Museum here in Chicago. And interestingly enough, the experience of working on the multi-touch table brought me my first project at the Field Museum. Um, so at the time, there was an exhibition about a beautiful mosaic floor dating back to about 300 AD that was found accidentally in Lod, Israel in 1996 during construction of a new highway. So they, found this floor, they dug it up and, kept it fairly like beautifully intact. And so this floor was being exhibited at different museums around the country. And when it came to the Field Museum, they had a programmer lined up to work on some sort of application on the IDEA multi-touch table. But something happened and that programmer backed out. And through the grapevine, they heard about my experience working on the multi-touch table back at the Getty. So, my first project became working on this create your own mosaic application for the Field Museum. And the mosaic contained drawings of animals and other icons of life from those times. And visitors were able to take different elements from the mosaic and basically scale, rotate, move them around, and create their own beautiful mosaic that was shared on a projection in the space. And then also they were able to send an image of their creation to themselves, a copy of that. So I love this project. It was such a joy to work on. It was just beautiful all around. And I tested and tested it relentlessly. But of course, once we launched and we were in the gallery space, the interactive just kept dying. And we couldn't quite figure out what the difference was between the space where I was testing versus the space where it was in the gallery space. Maybe it was running out of memory all of a sudden, wasn't sure, but it was just really frustrating. And I kept finding my way back to that machine to restart it on a daily basis. And, I guess one good side effect was that I saw a lot of the museum that way. But it was, nonetheless, even though there were a lot of restarts that needed to happen, it was a really fun project. And I think, the public got a lot out of it. And I believe that project traveled on to other museum exhibits. So that was great. I worked at the Field Museum for about a year. And then after that, I had a brief stint at the Frank Lloyd Wright Trust, where, a very different institution, much smaller. And my title was designer and developer. So that entailed quite a bit. I was designing print member magazines, and then also involved in managing and developing and designing the new website. And so, I don't have too much to say about that job, but being designer, developer, project manager, etc., and creating a website from scratch was quite a challenge, but we did it, and that website is still up and running, so we must have done something right. And yeah, so that was great. And then shortly after working there, I started looking for other opportunities in the Chicago area. And I had heard about a position at the Art Institute of Chicago. And, growing up, the Art Institute of Chicago was my favorite museum. Even when I moved back to Chicago, I'd go there and would think to myself, like, okay, I'm working with museums. Like, wouldn't it be great to work at the Art Institute, like this museum that I visited when I was young? And even in college, I used to go there on the free days, and it would just be a dream come true to work there. And if I saw a position that was open and was able to apply, and actually, knew someone that was working there as well. So um, it was, felt very lucky to be able to get an interview, and then started there. Got the job and started there New Year's Eve 2013. I purposely started on New Year's Eve 2013, thinking that it would bring me some luck, and boy did I need it, because my first project there was just very chaotic. I was hired to work on these digital scholarly catalogs. It was part of the OSCE initiative that came out of the Getty through a grant. And I know, people from the IMA labs, they worked on the platform. They developed the initial platform. Yes, um, we that I was basically hired to continue to keep adding features to the catalogs, and to support this platform that they were using to create these interactive online scholarly catalogs. Um, but one of my first projects was to actually take that platform and create an in-gallery interactive. So instead of this application, or this instance of the application being available online, um, they had they created some content in the catalog that was meant to accompany an exhibit on about a painting and the conservation behind it. And the painting was titled Madame Clapton. I have to clap every time I say it. But basically, uh, had to, it was a challenge. First of all, first job, first project working there, trying to even understand what the OSCE platform was, trying to understand the code, and trying to understand it enough to be able to make a change, to make it run on its own in kiosk mode on a multi-touch screen, how to respond to touch events, detect if there's inactivity, add a screensaver, etc. And all of this had to happen on a machine. The touchscreen machine that I was working on, that was going to be used for the exhibit, was in another office in another building across the street. So every day I'd make my way over there, and also the computer was in a space with a bunch of people that I just didn't know. I was new, so just a very chaotic experience. I was going there every day to work on the machine. The people there were really nice, but I definitely got to know a lot about the people that were working in the area, and that office in particular also had a bunch of different people from different departments kind of packed in there. So, to my left, I would hear this woman talking to potential members and about events and fundraisers, and she had a very loud voice, so I just heard all of her conversation. And then across the room, I there was another colleague who had just had a baby, and she had to curtain off her office to pump milk for her newborn. And so I'd hear the pump, go a loud pumping noise. And, I've been through that. So I was just like, oh man, so just a very chaotic environment, full of different kinds of people going through different things in their lives. And, here I was full of anxiety and stressed out about, getting this interactive to work in time, for the exhibit to open. But through working on this interactive, I, even though I'd worked in an art museum before, I didn't realize until that point how much science went into conservation of paintings or artworks in general. And the interactive was designed to and the exhibit itself was designed to sort of explain the research that went into finding out what this painting was about. So, I learned about they were basically trying to recreate the original background color that had faded over time. And I, found out about what how they look into, original, how where pigments were made, what sort of lake or materials within the environments that they use to create pigments, um, to establish different colors, and what they had to do, sort of recreate the original color, and how they found out what the original color was. So that was really interesting. And this painting was by Renoir, and through X-ray and infrared photography, which we were able to also show off in the interactive through sliders, and being able to compare the original, the conserved painting, or the final, yeah, conserved painting, and then being able to compare between X-ray and infrared images. They were able to understand Renoir's painting methods, which revealed that the original sketch underneath the painting, Madame, was a bit heavier, and through his painting, from the sketch, and sort of painting her, that she actually, she was a bit heavier, but then the painting sort of made her look skinnier. So it just reminded me of Photoshop and like what people do in magazines these days. But it was just really fascinating, and it really hit me then that, wow, scientists are in the building, um, and just having been now at the Art Institute for almost eight years, the learning hasn't stopped, and I really enjoyed working on these different projects that take me all over the museum. I just wish I could spend more time in the galleries looking at the art. That's one thing, is it's just when I tell people that I work at the Art Institute, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I have an MFA, like I love art. I practice art from time to time. But the amount of time that I actually spend in the galleries to actually look at the art is not much. But when I'm running around the museums checking to see if the machines are working, or if I need to restart something, I try to catch a glimpse here or there. And yeah, there's been, during my 8 years of working there, there's been so many times where security calls and tells me an iPad is down, or there was one iPad in particular that could not figure out what was going on. It was showing a bunch of content, and there was supposed to be a video that was playing, but instead you'd see a blank screen, and we can't have that in a major exhibition, an iPad showing a blank screen. And of course, this iPad was located in Regenstein, which is the main exhibit area at the Art Institute, but it's also the furthest away from where my office is. So I think I ran, the amount that I walked probably totaled marathons. And I mean, I would be so tired at the end of the day, just trying to troubleshoot, trying to figure out what was going on, going back and forth. And at the end of the day, I kind of had to make sort of the educated guess that, okay, it must be the Wi-Fi, because everything else is appearing. All the other content is appearing. It's must be that this video just relies on the Wi-Fi so heavily that it's just blanking out and not, getting the proper connection to display and appear. So the way that I solved that problem was taking that video and creating an animated GIF of the video, and replacing the video with the animated GIF. And thank goodness it worked. It made a difference, right? And I was just very happy about that. But things like that, where we just sort of had to, figure out, okay, here's the tech, here's what we want. If this isn't working, and if we've tried days, hours, whatever, if you feel like we've tried enough, like what's the next best thing? And luckily, at least in that situation, we were able to come up with a solution that really only we would know the behind the scenes about, but like to a regular visitor, they wouldn't notice a difference. And then let's see, I feel like a lot of the things that we've been working on lately, is about open access and trying to make our images available for the public to view and to make all of our collection data to be able to view it, to be able to work with it, to create new applications with it. And one of the initiatives that I'm part of and just really, uh, excited about is the IIIF initiative. Um, uh, it's basically a software and hardware framework that enables institutions to share their media. I think majority of institutions use it to share their images. Um, but I know that there's a lot of work going on with trying to create a protocol that is used by all the institutions. So the same protocol to be able to share their media, whether it's images, 3D models, videos, etc. Um, but to share them in a way where someone from another institution could just grab that true Renoir image and not have to search all over the internet for it, and to be able to use it to bring into another application where they can study it, annotate it, and share their research with other institutions. And I feel like that the initiative is just can be so useful for art historians, but also for educators. If I was an art history teacher, I could, go to these different institutions and be able to access the media and teach on a curriculum about French Impressionism and point out different details of artworks that I get to share with the students. Um, and then, yeah, and then another thing that's been really great about working at the Art Institute in particular is the amount of equity work that's been going on right now. And that's just one thing I wanted to mention is that, over the last couple of years, there's been quite an increase on and an attention on equity of all types, financial equity, uh, positional, social, political, and it's just opened my eyes to a lot of the things that are happening around me within the museum, but also to who I am. I was at an MCN conference one time, and I was invited to a POC dinner, and I got a text like, "Hey, do you want to come to a POC dinner tonight?" And in my head, I was just like, "What is POC? Like, is that point of contact? Like, what is that?" And I asked, I was like, "What is POC?" He's like, "People of color." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, I'm a person of color. Okay." Like, I never really thought of myself that way, but so just, a little detail there, but I feel like I've really started to look at myself differently within the context of what's happening in the world today and what's been happening. And as a person of color, um, how different interactions and the work that I'm doing and things like that are sort of I have a different perspective on things, and I feel like a lot of the work that's happening in museums is helping me understand that aspect of my identity, and also how and also bringing attention to other people's stories and how I traverse the landscape of work and life. So, but yeah, so I don't know. I could go on a bit more, but am I giving you guys any good content there?
Those are great stories. I don't want to derail you if you have more you want to keep going, but I can ask a very quick question. I just wanted to jump all the way back to the multi-touch table at the Getty, because that idea of somebody putting their glass on the table is
Yeah.
such a wonderful example of not anticipating how visitors are going to use technology in the galleries,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
and how do you deal with that now, like at the Art Institute? How do you figure out visitors' assumptions about technology? How do you study that?
Yeah, well, we have our interpretation department does a lot of studies within the galleries, kind of sitting there and watching visitors to see how they react, see if they're even using this technology. I guess one of the most common pieces of hardware that we have in the galleries is our iPads. So iPads that are telling stories about our collection. And so, they've done a lot of user studies to watching people, talking to them, asking them, if things are working correctly or if they're getting anything out of these stories, and how long are they spending. And then I myself have a special interest in that as well, as a programmer and as someone that's very interested in UX and just interested in creating applications that actually make a difference, that matter, that people can get something out of. But I've watched people as well just sitting in those galleries. And one thing with the iPads, like we have an application, we call them interactive features. And one thing that we did differently with them, and I can't tell you why we did it this way, but we have the way you scroll through the stories is like swiping up. And the one thing that we noticed when we were sitting in the galleries watching users is like the first thing they want to do is swipe sideways, because that's just how they're used to going through applications like this. So, and so then what we had to do was basically create a little animated sort of, graphic that showed you like, okay, you have to swipe up, and that's how you get through the story. And I think that it helped. But one thing that I sort of think about a lot is, let's not, is when developing new applications is, let's use what people have learned from people now, especially, there's more online shopping happening. There's more use of the internet happening in general. And people have learned and have sort of now, like by nature, have ways of how they're interacting with elements on the screen, or how they read content, and left to right and down, and so there's like different actions but the same actions performed by many people, by the majority of people. And so one thing that I try not to do is change that, when I'm developing new application. Like we're working on virtual tours right now at the Art Institute. And we were talking about a lot of the UI elements. And, there's, for example, should we have full screen, and should we have like a full screen button, and things like that. And, a lot of things that we talked about was like, well, what do people do when they're watching a Netflix video? What do people do when they're watching YouTube? Let's look at those things that have sort of trained us now, and how we interact with these sorts of media elements, and use that to inform how we design and develop our UI elements. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot. There's still like so much, you could still be very unique and creative, but I feel like developing based on what people already know and have already sort of, that's become their innate, way of interacting with things is maybe something to go on, and to take with you. So did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, and what a fantastic example for any UX designers out there about the importance of, instead of forcing people to learn your application, let's have our application work the way the users work, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
shifting philosophies, right? I mean, that's a hard thing for a lot of designers to come to terms with.
Yeah.
We've certainly seen this theme of shifting philosophies a lot in these oral histories. Um, you mentioned open access. I know the Art Institute has a fantastic open API, public API,
Yes.
right? What can you imagine 20 years ago, nobody would have been willing to do that. What do you think are some of the things that happened to shift that perspective where so many museums are doing this now?
Well, I think that there's a lot of makers in the world, and just a lot of self-teaching. I mean, I think with the popularity of YouTube DIY videos, my daughter, she's 12. I mean, she's YouTubing and DIYing all day long, and and so I feel like there's just so many ways, Khan Academy, there's just so many ways of, you know, uh, to learn things on your own. You don't necessarily need to take a class or to go to school for a particular thing, depending on what it is, but you could learn a lot of it on your own. And I think that also transparency and thinking about open access and just being transparent about data and collections. I think sort of mixing all of that together enables people to have access to things, and it's a and gives them opportunities to do things on their own, and to be creative and to think about the possibilities. Like now, I think through our API, there's been a lot of Twitter bots that I've seen come along. We created a really cool Chrome plugin with our API that basically, you on every new tab that you open in your browser, you get a random work of art. And that's just been amazing, especially for our staff, because we get to view our collection and items in our collection that we've never even seen at all, and there's just been so many times, because once you open a new tab, you see an artwork, and a lot of times I'm like, what is that? So you can click on the artwork and go to our object page and learn more about that artwork, and even download it, and maybe print something out and frame it. So, but I think having the open access initiative, making our code transparent on GitHub, and not always with the intention that, hey, somebody's actually going to like use it to make their own project based on what we did, because that's kind of hard to do, because every institution is different. But getting some ideas and sort of highlighting how we work, and making that more transparent. And I think that the open access initiatives around being able to download works of art and being able to create things through our API, it takes work, of course, to spread the word and to help people learn how to use the API. And I feel like we need to do a little bit of work there, and maybe providing more opportunities for the public to work with things like our API. But I think that the world is in a very different place now, and there's people that want to learn, that want to be challenged, that want to do things in their own time, and create some beautiful things.
It's just a wonderful example, and this idea of people discovering new art to love through a Chrome plugin that connects to the open API, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. And for some reason, it just reminded me, we chatted a few weeks ago with Deborah Howes, and
Mm-hmm.
she worked as an educator at the Art Institute in the 1980s. And she told a great story about how the board game Masterpiece, which of course featured a lot of paintings from the Art Institute, drove visitation to the Art Institute in the late 70s and early 80s.
Oh.
So you never know where your visitors are going to come from.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah. And yeah, I wonder, now that we're working on virtual tours of our galleries, we're a little bit late to the train, just because virtual tours were really popular this last year during the pandemic, when people couldn't physically be at the museum. But I still feel like they have a place now, because there's still a lot of people that just can't physically make it to the museum, and perhaps seeing an artwork on our website, but seeing it within the context of the other artworks in the space, in the context of an exhibition, can be really interesting for someone that's wanting to understand that. So we'll see. We're gonna launch soon, and we'll see. But one of the things that we're highlighting, actually, within our virtual tours, one of the first things we're highlighting is the conservation spaces, which nobody can go into. And those are just really interesting spaces where you can, find out about what the scientists are doing at the museum through exploring the space.
It's not a question, but I just want to say I love those behind the scenes views of conservators that so many museums put out. They're wonderful to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I have, yeah, I mean, during the 8 years that, or not 8 years, how long have I been? 18, so yeah, 13 years. I definitely have a lot of stories and restarts and things like that. But I feel like these are probably the highlights. Definitely a lot of moments where I thought I was just going to break down and cry and have a nervous breakdown because things just weren't working. I mean, even on Friday, this last Friday, I was working on a particular thing for just, one too many days. I was like, why is this not working? All I was trying to do was get some text to display on the screen. And I sort of knew why it wasn't, but I couldn't quite figure out how to get it to work. And, I tried many different things. I probably tried the same things several different times. Um, was just, it was Friday, 5 o'clock was coming, and I was like, oh, how can I get this to work? And I'm so tired of working on this. Like, this is just driving me insane. Um, but I put a question up on the software forum, and I was like, look, this is what I'm trying to do. And for me, like when I ask questions about things, I need to make sure that I've done everything possible, um, you know, and made sure that like I've tried everything myself before I ask these questions. And maybe sometimes it's not always the right approach because that can take a long time. But I put a question up on the forum um, and then kind of switched gears and worked on something else. And I was just like, all right, let's see what happens. Let's see if I can get an answer to this by Monday. And I checked on Saturday and found an answer, tried it, and thankfully it worked. You know, um, but again, I'm just reminded like, okay, maybe you should have just asked this question a little earlier before you started feeling like you were going to have a nervous breakdown. So, and that's one thing I try to practice. Like I'm lucky enough to because at several museums in the past, like sometimes I'd be like the only developer, um, or only the only person working on a certain type of project or whatever, that where I would only know the answer. It didn't really have too many other people that I could ask. But luckily, right now, I work with a few other developers and who are really great, and I'm able, I give myself like an appropriate amount of time. And if I'm not able to find the answer, I will ask for help. And I think that that's, something that is really important because you could sort of uh, overwork yourself into a nervous breakdown. um, but yeah, especially when it comes to coding and all that. So
Well, I was just going to say that's another theme that we've heard a lot through these oral histories. This the anxiety, the stress of the behind the scenes work, especially when you're working toward last minute projects.
yes, yes, definitely. Yeah, exhibitions have to open. There's a date. It's public. Um, so there's definitely a lot of anxiety around that. And yeah, and I think it's really important to know that like, okay, you're not alone. There are ways of asking others for help, or just taking a break from it and being, that's been another thing that's helped me a lot is, all right, let me go take a shower. I haven't taken a shower in 2 days. Like, let's go, take a shower or like take a walk. And that's also just like reducing that stress and reducing the anxiety and being able to come back to the problem with a clearer head just has worked so many times.
And I wonder if this is why so many conferences, including MCN, right, are having entire sessions now focused on empathy and self care.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
for sure. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah. I know self-care, I thought it was just a fad. I didn't really even know what it was until probably last year or 2 years ago when I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I should take a shower. Yeah, or just take a break. And yeah, I think, maybe people that are sort of new in the job or new, just postgraduates may not realize that because they're probably feeling the pressure. But after all these years of working on projects that need to be ready for exhibits, it's just I just haven't found working under stress like very helpful at all. So yeah, have to constantly remind myself like, okay, take a break. And I bet, that answer will come to you in a bit. So, and it's proven true.